It's Monday, October the 28th, 2024, and this is the Daily Article Podcast. I'm Chris Elkins, narrating today's Daily Article, written by Denison Forum co-founder and CEO, Dr. Jim Denison. Israel launched 3 waves of attacks on Iran Saturday morning in retaliation for an Iranian attack on October 1st. The moment Israeli leaders chose was symbolic, the end of the festival of Simchat Torah, which on the Jewish calendar is the anniversary of October 7 last year. The Associated Press reported yesterday that the attack damaged facilities at a secretive military base linked to Tehran's nuclear weapons program and another base tied to its ballistic missile program. What comes next? A senior Israeli military official said the response was designed to send a strong message while avoiding escalation in the near term. Iran's military signaled that Tehran would not retaliate immediately. However, an Iranian foreign ministry spokesman said today that his country will use all available tools to deliver a definite and effective response to the Zionist regime. Some analysts note that by damaging Iran's air defenses and radar system, Israel has made it easier for its fighter jets to attack Iran in the future. This could deter Iran from responding forcefully, leading to de-escalation in the conflict, or it could embolden Israel to stage further attacks in the future, perhaps depending on the results of the American presidential election. Mara Karlin is a Johns Hopkins professor and a former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Defense for Strategy, Plans, and Capabilities. In Foreign Affairs, she writes, "Today's global security environment is the most complex since the end of the Cold War." End quote. Her extensive analysis is titled The Return of Total War. She explains that in previous eras, wars were fought between groups of nations, the Allies against the Central Powers in World War I, and against the Axis in World War II, for example. The Cold War continued bipolar conflicts between the West and the Soviet Union and its satellites. After 9/11, the focus shifted to non-state actors such as Al-Qaeda and ISIS. Hamas's October 7th massacre merged the two. Since then, Iran has been waging war on the Jewish state through non-state proxies Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis. Then, last spring, Iran attacked Israel directly, provoking a response by Israel on Iran. On October 1st, Iran attacked Israel again. Last Saturday, Israel responded. Now we are witnessing the emergence of major power alliances that look eerily similar to those that waged previous world wars. The U.S. and its European allies have been assisting Israel with weapons and other material, and recently with U.S. soldiers deployed as anti-missile system operators. On the other side, China is by far the largest buyer of energy from Iran, defying Western sanctions to fuel Tehran's war effort. Russia provides technical assistance to Iran's nuclear program and supplies it with weapons in its conflict with Israel. Russia has also provided targeting data enabling Iran's proxy, the Houthis in Yemen, to attack Western ships in the Red Sea. Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February 2022 has led to similar bipolar alliances. 26 Western countries have committed $1 billion or more to Ukraine. On the other side, North Korea recently sent thousands of troops to fight alongside Russian forces in Ukraine and has been delivering shells and other ammunition to Russia. Iranian drones and short-range ballistic missiles have been deployed by Moscow in its onslaught against Ukraine. China has given Russia substantial amounts of microelectronics and machine tools which can be used to make weapons. Putin's war against Ukraine is catalyzing a new axis between nuclear powers China, Russia, and North Korea, along with Iran, which the U.S. says could likely assemble a nuclear weapon in probably 1 or 2 weeks. Meanwhile, the U.S. and the West have clearly signaled their support for Taiwan in the face of rising tensions with China. There are obviously flawed, fallen people on both sides of every conflict. However, a deep ideological difference between the two sides of the emerging total war is worth noting. On October 7, 2023, Hamas massacred Israeli civilians and has used Palestinian civilians as human shields in the months since. In support for their October 7th atrocities, Hezbollah has bombed population centers in northern Israel, forcing thousands of civilians to flee their homes. Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine has cost as many as 120,000 Russians and 70,000 Ukrainians their lives. China has conducted a genocidal persecution of the Uyghurs for a decade, employing torture, sexual violence, and internment camps against the minority Muslims. All are led by autocrats who leverage their people for their personal, power-driven agendas. By contrast, while fighting enemies hiding behind civilians, Israel has taken extraordinary steps to safeguard non-combatants, knowing that the death of innocents only exacerbate future terrorism against the Jewish state. Americans who protest the tragic deaths of Palestinians share Israel's commitment to the value of human life. While Western nations have geopolitical reasons for supporting Ukraine, their underlying motive is the defense of innocent Ukrainians. All are led by elected officials who are accountable to the people they serve. This difference can be tied to Genesis 1, where we learn in verse 27 that God created man in his own image. As a result, Israel's King Solomon prayed in 1 Kings 8, verse 43 that all the people of the earth may know your name and fear you, as do your people Israel. America's founders similarly declared that all men are created equal. There is a Judeo-Christian foundational commitment to the sanctity of each human life that runs through Western culture. At our worst, slavery, racism, anti-Semitism, legalized abortion, and euthanasia, for example, we violate this commitment. At our best, we honor it for ourselves and the world. Let's close by applying this foundational commitment to ourselves. Jesus taught us in John 13, verse 34, "Just as I have loved you, you are also to love one another." If we obey his command, we will love the Iranian people when their theocratic rulers do not. We will love the Palestinians when their terrorist leaders use them as human shields. We will love the people of Russia and China more than their despotic dictators do. We will therefore pray for that peace which is not just the absence of conflict, but the presence of righteousness. Since such peace ultimately comes from the Prince of Peace, noted in Isaiah 9, verses 6 and 7, we will pray and work for spiritual awakening across the globe and in our own hearts. When we do, we share God's heart in this and every human conflict. During the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln was purportedly asked if God was on his side. He replied, "My greatest concern is to be on God's side." Will you be on God's side today? And note, for more on living and loving in God's power, please see my latest Denison Forum website article, "Transgender Golfer Competes While Players Dispute LPGA Policy, How to Be More Moral Than We Want to Be." A link to it is in today's show notes. We're grateful for our podcast listeners. If you find the Daily Article podcast helps you better understand today's news and cultural issues and then respond biblically, please rate and review the Daily Article podcast on the platform from which you subscribe. That helps people find and follow the Daily Article podcast.